Horizons, the podcast from thegeopolity.com. My name is Yusuf and I'm an analyst at the Geopolity. Now, it's been 20 years since 9/11 attack, which started the global war on terror. However, since the failure in Afghanistan and the Taliban coming into power, a lot of questions are being raised about the future of the US global power and its credibility on the world stage. Here to unpack all these issues is Geopolity founder Adnan Khan. How are you, Adnan?
I'm all right, alhamdulillah. Hope you're well.
Now, it's been a long time since America has had any real foreign policy success. People have always known the 20th century to be considered as the American century, but now in the 21st century, it seems like everything's going horribly wrong. They're kind of messing up in every single country. So Iraq isn't really a success story. The Middle East is a mess. And now the US is the latest victim in Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires. What does this really tell us about the US?
Okay, I think, that's really on everyone's mind at the moment, especially with the recent withdrawal from Afghanistan. I mean, what's really happened and what's really coming to town now is US credibility is really on the line. I remember when the 21st century began, America was on top of the world. There was no one even remotely close to America's power and influence in the world. America was opening up the world under the guise of globalization. America a decade before had won the Cold War. The American dream, Hollywood, American culture really dominated the world. But 20 years on, things are very, very different. American democracy is no longer the shining beacon for everybody. The American economy is no longer the model everybody wants. America's military has really taken a beating. They've just now become the latest victims in the graveyard of empires. But there's many other areas which don't get much headlines, where America's also struggled with its military. If you look at South Sudan, the separation of South Sudan from North Sudan was orchestrated by America. That country is a complete mess. If you look at Libya, it's a complete mess. If you look at Somalia, it's a complete mess. These are all countries where America has been interfering. And America's military for long was its trump card. This was the ace card it always had. No matter how bad it got, the boots could be sent in and they could reverse things if they were going in the wrong way and give America a military victory. But with defeat in Afghanistan, even that has gone. So that's why you're right in your question. America hasn't, I'm trying to think, apart from the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, where they were able to remove the regime initially pretty quickly, since then, really, America's not really had any foreign policy successes. And this is why it's quite normal now for people to be questioning America's credibility. Is America a nation in political decline? Can America continue to shape the world when really for the last 20 years it's struggled to shape any of the conflicts it's got involved in? So we're really in a unique time, really, where the global superpower since World War II, after just 7 decades, is actually struggling to remain the global power.
Now, as you mentioned, everyone's talking about America's decline, and we've got a lot of experts on this, and it's become an industry in its own right. Would you be able to outline some of the various different views and opinions out there by these experts?
So you're right. I like the way you put that. It's become an industry in itself. It has. Because America was in such a dominant position, it was a unipolar power. Everyone is studying how is it going horribly wrong. And you've got a few views. Broadly, I would say you can fit them into two categories. You've got those people that believe nations rise, nations fall. This is a normal cycle. It's like it's a part of nature and there's nothing much you can really do about it. Then the other view is that decline can be reversed. It just requires a nation to reevaluate and rejuvenate itself. So this was Brzezinski's view, that America could revitalize itself if it had a deep, hard look at itself, at what it has in terms of power and what it can offer the world. So Paul Kennedy, the famous historian who's written a very, very thick book on the rise and fall of powers, he believes America's overseas military commitments, and the deficit spending to maintain that is what's causing America's decline. And if you think about it, if you're a global power, you've got to be everywhere. That is a massive cost, and that cost can really get out of control when you're going to be everywhere at the same time. America fought 2 wars in Eurasia over the last 20 years, and look at what it's done. It's overstretched it, and both those countries are a complete mess today. You've got other scholars also who have given their assessments, and a lot of their views are based on the cyclical nature of history. So in a book, The Fourth Turning, An American Prophecy, the authors, they claim that in about 2008, the US would enter a period of crisis that would peak in 2020. So their timeline was actually pretty accurate. And again, a lot of their views is cyclical. To be a power, you need a bit of innovation, you need an economy, then you start overspending. All of these sort of challenges happen. Many others, they look at the economic nature of being a power. Their view is you've got a domestic population to feed and maintain, and then also you have your external position as well. So there comes a point where the amount of money you're spending outside the country is way more than inside your country, so you end up neglecting your population, and then that leads to the beginning of all sorts of issues evolving over time. So you've got many views there. I mean, Noam Chomsky, he's always maintained that America's been in decline, and he looks at it more from a cultural perspective, that really America for a long time has been contradicted some of the very values it believes in. So you're right, it's become a whole industry itself, and what you've really got is those who believe it's a natural cycle, and then you've got those who believe that America has overextended itself. America is spending way more than it actually has. So all of this is going to come to a boil at some point.
Now, you mentioned that the decline, it's not been something that's just started recently, it's been going over for the last few years. I guess one of the things that comes to mind is the success of Trump, his continued support. What does that tell us about the US public view about America's position?
So the Donald Trump phenomena actually reveals something very interesting. All of the declinists, when they look at US power, it's all about US power and its ability to influence events around the world. What the Donald Trump phenomena has shown that America has deep problems domestically. Now, if you got problems domestically, at some point, it's going to catch up with you being effective externally. So Donald Trump's election campaign was all based on America's going down the wrong path, America's losing credibility, America's being ripped off, we're not being taken seriously. And this resonated with a lot of Americans who felt foreign nations seem to be getting more out of America than the American public. So that's why Donald Trump, he won the election that he did. And he got 76 million votes in the election he technically lost. What Donald Trump has now done, or his phenomena, it's revealed that there's a deep divide even within America between Democrats and Republicans, between haves and have-nots, between the North and the South. There's a big divide. And this divide eventually will catch up with America being effective abroad. So America's decline for a long period was about how can America influence events externally. What you're seeing now is America has significant domestic problems as well. So what this means is the decline or the lack of America's ability to influence events abroad is having an impact on domestic public opinion. Now, if you think about it, the domestic public, they work in the factories that produce the military equipment. They pay the taxes that are used to pay for America's most expensive component of its budget, which is the military. It's the people of America whose sons and daughters and fathers and brothers are based abroad for 6 months to a year to execute America's wars. If you've got a divide internally, all of this gets brought into question. And it reminds me a bit of what happened with the Soviet Union in the end. Soviet Union was in a mess internally, but externally they were flexing their muscles. And eventually by the mid-1980s, it caught up with them. They couldn't hide the dysfunction that was going on internally. We have a scenario at the moment where the transition in Afghanistan was much more smoother than the last general election that we had in America. So the Trump effect is actually a very important discussion and component of this discussion of America's decline.
I think you put it nicely about trying to hide the instability at home. I think Capitol Hill, the events at Capitol Hill last year actually showed how divided the country actually is. Now, what are the main factors that indicate that the US is actually in decline?
So that's a very good question. When we're talking about decline, what we're fundamentally talking about is the ability of the US in this case to influence and get other nations to do what it wants. So America has foreign policy objectives, and how does it get other nations to do things which are in America's interests? So historically, America has used its political power, it's used its economic power, and it's used its military power as well. Beyond that, it's also used some of its cultural power to get people to see the world the way it sees it. But if we look at each of these, what you find is none of these have been translated in the last 20 years into foreign policy successes for America. So if we look at America's biggest hammer, which is its military, well, if you look at the state of Afghanistan today, it's lost a war. Now, okay, America has lost wars previously as well, but America's military is head and shoulders above everybody else. So the fact that America failed to win in Afghanistan, its military got into massive problems in Iraq. Its military has lost a lot of its credibility. This is why China and Russia are much more confident in dealing with America. So that's the first area. And there's also question marks of how long can America keep funding its bloated military. It's having an impact on its domestic economy. On the economic front, America's free markets, the American dream, the American way of running the economy was the model everybody looked at. But since the economic crisis of 2008, people look at the wealth distribution figures in America. I think 1% of the public own about 40% of the wealth, 10% own over 60%. The massive wealth misdistribution has really undermined America's claim that its economy is the one that should be emulated. Then alongside that, America was at the forefront historically of starting global institutions, global treaties, global agreements. But with Donald Trump, you saw America left the climate accord. Donald Trump raised questions about NATO. America now, I mean, if you look at COVID as an example, America's not even at the forefront leading the solution for COVID. In fact, China has probably done more for COVID than America has. When you put this all together, the America of today is just very different to the America of 20, 30 years ago. 20, 30 years ago, economic, political, military, security, all these fronts, America was leading, bringing the world together. Not anymore. In fact, the institutions and agreements America set up, there's question marks over the viability of those as well today. So all of these put together, this is why many people look at America and feel America's in decline, because the tools it uses, they're no longer able to achieve the goals America has its sights on.
Many people would argue that although, yes, their military isn't what it used to be, the economy has had a few issues here and there, it's still, US has still got the largest economy and it's still got the strongest military. So could we really say it's in decline? Is it that it's just shifting its resources and power in different ways?
Mm-hmm. So absolutely, America has the biggest hammer and it has the biggest checkbook. The problem here is you can have the biggest, but if it's not being effective and it's not working, you will lack credibility. Today, countries like South Korea, countries like Japan, who rely on America's security guarantee, they must be thinking, in recent history, we've seen America abandon Afghanistan, somewhere where it was there for 2 decades. It abandoned the Kurds in Syria after supporting them. Is America really a reliable security guarantor? So you're right. From a military perspective, America's budget, America's Navy, I mean, most of the military metrics, America is way ahead of everybody else. However, how effective are they? How is it a country like Afghanistan, where the Taliban were using weapons from decades ago, they were able to bring America to a stalemate? America started talking to the Taliban over 10 years ago. America had concluded by 2009, when Obama came in, that this war isn't technically winnable unless America was prepared to put in so many troops. America's economy, according to many people feel, America's economy is just running on debt. You know, the American economy is about 23 trillion. I think debt is about 24, 25 trillion. So that debt, America's got to pay back. And in fact, that repayment of that debt is taking up more and more of the budget on a yearly basis. So many people feel America is really spending beyond its means. Really, what's going on is the wall is cracking. We could see the cracks in the wall. When the wall falls, everybody would say, well, the wall was always weak. But during the time when the wall was cracking, nobody could foresee that it was going to fall. And that seems to be the position America's in, which is it's spending beyond its means. It's got a bloated military. It's neglecting its domestic population in order to achieve it. So yes, from a monetary and a metric perspective, America has got the biggest military in the world. America has got the largest economy in the world, although China is catching up. But none of that is translating into global foreign policy success. None of that is translated in the world thinking we need America, and without America, the world can't work. Now, what's unique about that is 20 years ago, nobody would have ever thought that. 20 years ago, America's military might and America's economic might were things that affected everybody in direct and indirect ways. Today, people just don't view it like that. So that's why, yes, America can have the biggest hammer and the largest checkbook, But that's irrelevant if that's not achieving its foreign policy goals.
It's a very interesting point you make about them having the biggest hammer and the largest checkbook, but often missing their mark. If we go down that line and we see the war on terror as actually being a big failure, what was it that US was actually trying to achieve? What was their mark?
So, really, after the Cold War, the war on terror was the first time America was engaging in spreading its values globally. Obviously, during the Cold War, America was in a battle with communism. After the Cold War, it battened down, it pushed a bit of globalization, and the war on terror effectively was a front for those areas of the world where America wanted to spread its values, wanted to democratize these regions, and their strategy was via regime change, they would do that. So the neocons were talking about this before 9/11. They were talking about this from the mid 1990s onwards. What happened was 9/11, they became the pretext to execute this, and the war on terror became the sticker that they put on this. And obviously, the American government had complete support by the American public to fight a war against terror because of 9/11. But the goals of the war on terror had already been constantly outlined throughout the mid 1990s onwards. The neocons were talking about how they're going to make the 21st century the American century. And the neocons came to really rely upon using their military to create regime change in the world. So the war on terror really was about expanding American influence and spreading her values. So the fact that that's failed, that is a failure of epic proportions. It means that there's a whole region of the world that rejected American values, and it didn't just reject them, it actually held America's military power to a stalemate. These sort of foreign policy failures are failures that lead to the decline of nations and civilization. So it's a massive defeat for the US.
On the topic of defeat, with America's defeat in Afghanistan, what does this tell us? How much of it was just purely a military defeat, or is it much more? Is it a political defeat?
So definitely it's a military defeat because you've gone into Afghanistan, you've gone to do regime change, and after 20 years, you've replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. So it's a military defeat. The political defeat is interesting because America has transitioned from using its military to cutting a political diplomatic deal with Afghanistan to preserve some of its regional interests. However, from a perception perspective, from a credibility perspective, America has also been defeated politically. So really, as far as the people are concerned, America has been both militarily and politically defeated. I remember reading a quote once from one of the generals from Vietnam, and he was talking to an American general well after the Vietnam War finished. And the American general was saying to him that technically, you never defeated us militarily. Because America could not win, America thought it was best to, over time, leave. So he goes, you didn't militarily defeat us, we just realized we couldn't win. And then the Vietnamese general said to him, it doesn't matter. Because as far as everybody was watching TV, as far as they were concerned, America had been physically defeated. So perceptions are important because credibility is based upon perception. So yeah, America has been definitely militarily defeated, or it couldn't win militarily, but it's been politically defeated as well, or it's seen to be.
Now, a lot of people would argue that US has a history of nation building, and they often give examples such as Germany and Japan after World War II. Why has the US actually struggled so much in the last couple of decades, especially in the Muslim world?
So this is actually a very good question because some of this was used to justify the invasions in Afghanistan and Iraq for the last 2 decades. America was talking about nation building via regime change, and when this went south, America started to abandon this idea and say, we're not into nation building, we're not into these forever wars. And the example always referred to is Germany and Japan. And I don't think they really apply and can be applied to the wars they're fighting today. And the reason for that is the German public supported the Nazi ideas. They were behind Hitler's aims of creating a strong Germany at the heart of Europe. In Japan, the people supported the emperor, and the emperor supported the radical regime that was in Japan. So when these two countries lost, the people saw it not just as a loss of their rulers, they saw it as their loss and a loss of the vision that they had as well. So they abandoned whatever vision they had and accepted what the victors brought to them. So they accepted that they had lost, and whatever vision they had, that was wrong as well. That's not what's happened here in the Muslim world. What's happened in the Muslim world is firstly the rulers don't even represent the people. That's the first thing. So when the rulers lose, the people don't see it as their own loss. The other main thing is America, when it went to Japan and it went to Germany, it faced a racist ideology, a authoritarian ideology. When it's gone to the Muslim world, it's facing Muslims who believe in Islam. And as far as they're concerned, America has come to their countries in order to invade them. Therefore, these are wars on Islam. And that's a massive motivator for them to stand against the US. So the Taliban, that has been their key motivation. And they make that plain again and again and again. That, we have God on our side. What do you have? You can have your weapons. You can have your mother of all bombs. You can have your nukes. So really what's happened here is America's facing a people who have a different set of values. So America's tried to bomb them back to the Stone Age. It wasn't able to achieve that. America's tried to do a bit of nation building in Afghanistan. That's been a complete disaster. And now American officials accept that the Afghan people historically have been difficult to conquer because they have different values and culture. So what this actually shows you is something very interesting. That America's tools of the economy, of their military, these were already in decline. But America is failing to even convince people, especially in the Muslim world, of the ideas it has, which it believes is good for the world, is good for the people. That's a bigger failure if you think about it. You can lose a few wars, you can throw money at a problem, you don't resolve it. But surely over a period of time, if you've got a set of values that you believe in, you should be able to convince other people. But time and time again, America has gone to the Muslim world and it's come across a brick wall called Muslims and Islam. And that's why America it doesn't really have a very successful recent history now of nation building. Japan and Germany was a long time ago. How many people are alive today when Second World War took place? How many people are alive today that physically took place in rebuilding Japan and Germany? There are many people around today who saw America try to develop Afghanistan. They've been watching America throw money at Iraq and it's been a complete disaster. So really, this is just another element to add to America's tools being declined and America's tools not leading to foreign policy outcomes.
Now, we've already mentioned that America definitely has the resources to actually achieve some of these things. Would you say it's more of a mismanagement of those things, i.e., certain presidents such as Trump, or would you say it's something which is endemic and it would be common to all the governments that now come in?
So if we were doing this podcast, Yusuf, 10, 15 years ago, I think that's a valid argument. It's Bush. Bush doesn't know what he's doing. It's the neocons, they don't know what they're doing. However, we're now 20 years into the war on terror. We're 20 years after 9/11. We've had Bush, we've had Obama, we've had Trump, and now we've got Biden. Okay, Biden's only been in for 6 months. You got 4 presidents. But keep in mind, the State Department didn't change. The military, the Pentagon, is the same generals. All the other American departments, it's the same people. And we've had the same problem again and again. We've seen 4 presidents deal with Afghanistan, but the outcomes still being the same. So what you've got here, you can't really put this down to one particular president. This seems to be a deeper problem that transcends different presidents. Each president said they're going to come and change things. They're going to mix things up. They're going to make things better. But really, all of them fell into the same problem again, which is they were unable to tackle or resolve the quagmire America's into. So what this would indicate, the fact that this transcends the different administrations, that there's a more systemic issue. It's more deeper than any individual. And this is why people call this decline, that what's going on is a rot has set in where America's tools are no longer effective. And that's what effectively decline is.
China is always compared to the US when we talk about US decline. I think we've already mentioned it a few times today. What sort of threat does China actually pose to the US?
So yeah, that's a very good question because China is getting all the headlines. The withdrawal from Afghanistan, a lot of the justification is America's got bigger problems to deal with, which is China. My personal opinion is China is a threat to America, but not in the way people are making it out to be. China, for me, it is challenging America in Southeast Asia in its own region. As far as China is concerned, it has a border with numerous countries, and that region, China is trying to strengthen itself by expanding its military reach and expanding its dominance in the region. And in my opinion, that's it. Beyond that, China actually doesn't pose a threat to America yet. China is not challenging America's global position. It doesn't even have the capabilities to actually do that. So why does America constantly talk about China being a threat? Now, I think some of it is to justify America's massive military spending and things like that. However, if you look at this, America is the dominant power in all the regions of the world, 5-6 regions. China is challenging America in one region. If China was to defeat America and come to dominate its region, that is a reduction in America's influence in the world. And that is unacceptable for America. America since World War II has been the dominant power in every region. All the powerful regional nations, their biggest challenge in their region is not usually other countries in the region, it's America and her influence in every region, be it military, economic, or political. So what China has done is economically developed. It needs to defend its supply lines, it needs to defend its markets, and it needs to defend itself in its region. So this is the threat China poses to America at the moment. That can change. So you've got two views about China really from America. The one view is the right-wing view or the neocon view, which is if China has achieved what it has now, in 10 to 30 years' time, China will be even more powerful and it will challenge America. So China has to be dealt with and confronted now. The other view is that large corporations, they want to benefit from China's economic development. They want access to China's market. So they want the US president to have good economic relations with China so they can benefit from it as well. Since George W. Bush came to power in 2000, America has shifted really from economics to more military confrontation. Obama started the pivot to Asia. Donald Trump started the trade war. So it's very clear, as far as America is concerned, they are the global power and there's a rising power who's trying to challenge us, which is China. I think the only caveat I would put in, China is not challenging America's global position. China is challenging America's position in its own region at the moment only. But that's still a significant challenge for America. No other country is remotely closer to America. China's economy is growing, is getting closer to America. China's military is the only one developing at a pace where America looks at the world where other countries are cutting their defense budgets. China's actually increasing it. So for more metrics, if we were sitting in America and we were looking at the medium to long-term trends, where the threat going to come from, naturally you will look at China. But I think China does get a lot of bad press. It's not the threat everybody makes it out to be. But yeah, it does represent a pretty limited threat at the moment, which is in its region. But that's still significant for the US.
What about the rest of the world? What does the US decline mean actually for the rest of the world?
So for the rest of the world, it represents a very interesting opportunity. If America's in decline, then it means America's ability to impose on them, America's ability to shape events according to its interests, America being able to bully the world, that is going to drastically decrease. So the area that comes to mind straight away is the Muslim world. America for decades has had the advantage of winning over agent rulers, vassal states who have done America's bidding. If America's in decline, those nations can break free. Those nations can become regional powers. Those nations can actually achieve things that America has ensured that they can't actually achieve. So with the decline of America, it means the whole architecture America established, people can actually break free. And that, if you think about it, that actually represents a interesting opportunity going forward.
One of the biggest questions we have is, can the US actually halt its decline? Is there anything that they can do to actually change things? What do you think about that?
So that's a very interesting question because there are some thinkers in America who are looking at this. The problem you got with America, it needs to really completely reevaluate what its role in the world is and what it's prepared to do. As far as America is concerned, its foreign policy is determined from the 1990s onward primacy. America should be the number one power over everybody else. Now, the question with that is you've been the number one power since the 1990s, 30 years. What has the American public got out of that? A very tiny elite oligarchy in America have massively benefited from America's global position. What has the American public got? So the American public's view is, it's interesting, amongst the American public, being isolationist, which is America just sticks to its continent and doesn't really engage in the world, that is still that is the public opinion in America. That's why American officials constantly have to justify what America's doing. If we don't go to the other side of the world, the war's going to come to us. So the argument about not leaving Afghanistan, or the criticism against Biden, was by leaving Afghanistan, America can come under threat from foreign terrorists. The reality here is firstly, that's actually not true, because 9/11 was done by multiple Saudi citizens. It wasn't actually by Afghans. So what America needs to do is really reevaluate its position in the world. Do you really need to have the massive presence that you actually have? So unless America does that, then it can really claw back some of its presence. It could also set up an alliance system where it shares the world with other powers. So I think in 1968, there was an agreement, the detente between the Soviet Union and America, where they effectively shared the world, the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc. The problem you got with this is the American elite, their view is the world is theirs. And their view is America's power should be used for them to effectively have a say in the world. So these people would have to give that up if America was to change that. But there's a lesson for America. You went out to Iraq and Afghanistan to effectively eat your cake, and you learned the hard way that you can't actually do that. So this is a good time for America, as good as any really, to really reevaluate what America stands for as a nation, and what America wants as a nation, and what the public want as a nation. My prediction is I don't think anything's going to change. In fact, I think America's going to batten down and try to keep on doing what it's doing, but in different ways. And that probably will open the door to America's eventual decline as a power in the world.
Thank you for your time today, Adnan. To the audience, if you want to learn any more about the issues raised today, please check our website, www.thegeopolity.com, all one word. You can also learn about various other issues by accessing our website. You'll find comprehensive insights. Thank you for listening. I'm Yusuf. Take care.